surely expiration of a payroll tax holiday would also constitute a massive tax increase on the working people of America. Republicans, this is Bruce Bartlett, who I am quoting, as a former advisor to Ronald Reagan and the first President Bush. Republicans would prefer to destroy Social Security's finances or permanently fund it with general revenues, switch the revenue base from the payroll tax to general revenues, than allow a once-suspended payroll tax to be reimposed. Arch Social Security hater Peter Ferrara once told me, and again, this is Bruce Bartlett, former advisor to Presidents Reagan and Bush 1. Peter Ferrara once told me that funding it with general revenues was part of his plan to destroy it by converting Social Security into a welfare program rather than an earned benefit. He was right, end quote. In other words, what this issue is about is breaking the bonds that we've had since the inception of Social Security, where Social Security was paid for by workers. You pay for it when you're working and you get the benefits when you're old. That's the deal. There is no federal money coming in from the General Treasury. And this gentleman, Mr. Bartlett, thinks, and I suspect he is quite right, that this is the beginning of an effort to destroy Social Security. And I would say that Social Security, you know, the real debate about Social Security, Mr. President, is not one about finances. There has been a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. I hear from some of my friends on the Republican side that Social Security is going bankrupt, it's not going to be there for our kids, and that is absolutely not true. Social Security today has a $2.6 trillion surplus. Social Security can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American if we don't start diverting funds for the next 29 years, at which point it pays out about 78% of benefits. So our challenge in 29 years is to fill that 22% gap. That's it. Can we do it? Sure we can. President Obama, when he was campaigning, and I think has repeated since, a very good suggestion that instead of having a cap in terms of which people contribute into the fund at $106,000, what we should do is do a bubble, go up to $250,000, and people at $250,000 or more should contribute into the Social Security Trust Fund. If you did that and nothing else, you've essentially solved the Social Security problem for the next 75 years. Very easy. It is done. So what this payroll tax holiday is doing, in my view, is pretty dangerous. I don't think enough people understand that, and I think that is one of the strong reasons why this agreement should be opposed. Now, Mr. President, another reason that I believe that this agreement is not as good an agreement as we can get is that it provides tens and tens of billions of dollars in tax cuts for various types of businesses. And I'm not here to say that these tax cuts cannot do some good. I suspect that they can. But I think that there is a lot better way to create the jobs that we need than providing these particular business tax cuts. Frankly, I think economists from almost all political spectrums, conservative to progressive, understand that if we are serious about creating the kinds of jobs that this economy desperately needs, and if we want to do that as rapidly and as cost-effectively as we possibly can, the way to do that is not to provide business tax cuts, because right now, corporate America is sitting on close to $2 trillion cash on hand. They have a ton of money. The problem is that the products that they are creating are not being bought by the American people because the American people don't have the money to buy those goods and services. So if we are serious, Mr. President, in creating the jobs that we need, I think that what we have got to do is start making significant investments in our crumbling infrastructure. And that is rebuilding our bridges, our roads, our water systems, broadband, cell phone service, public transportation, our rail system, dams. In every single one of these areas, we are seeing our infrastructure crumbling. And the point is that if you simply ignore a crumbling infrastructure, and I say this as a former mayor who dealt with this issue, if you simply ignore a crumbling infrastructure, you know what? It doesn't get better all by itself. And I know many mayors and governors would very much like to think that they could turn their backs on the infrastructure because it's not a sexy investment. It's not a sexy investment. But the reality is that if you don't pay attention to it today, it only gets worse and it costs you more money. You know, it's like having a cavity. You can get your cavity filled, you neglect it, as I have, and you end up doing root canal, far more painful, far more expensive. That's what it's about. Do we maintain our infrastructure? Clearly, we are not. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we should be spending about $2.2 trillion in the next 5 years in order to maintain our infrastructure. Now, I don't know about Alaska, don't know. Spent a very brief time in your beautiful state. But I do know that in Vermont, we have bridges all over our state that are in desperate need of repair. It is fair to say that the stimulus package has been very, very positive for my state. We're spending more money on roads and bridges, but we have a long, long way to go. So we're putting money into our roads and bridges. We're hiring people to do that work. That's what we should be doing all over the country. But, Mr. President, it is not just roads and bridges. It is water systems. I told this story, I guess a few hours ago now, about the mayor of Rutland, Vermont, which is the second largest city in the state. And I was in his office and he showed me a pipe. And the pipe was in pretty bad shape. And he said, you know, this pipe was laid by an engineer, was developed, who then, after he did this, went off to war. And he said, what war do you think he went off to fight? And he said it was the Civil War, the Civil War. So this was pipe laid in Rutland, Vermont, which is still being used, which was laid, I'm guessing, in the 1850s, maybe 1860s. And it's not just Rutland, Vermont. When I was mayor of Vermont, mayor of Burlington, we had to spend $50 million back then, it's 20 years ago, I think, rebuilding our wastewater plant and making sure that a lot of pollution and filthy water didn't get into our beautiful lake, Lake Champlain. It's an expensive proposition. But right now, we're going to have to invest in that. It's our water systems, our dams, our levees, our roads, our bridges. I mentioned earlier and contrasted what was going on in infrastructure in the United States as opposed to China. And I quoted from a book called Third World America, written by Arianna Huffington, who tells us essentially that if we don't get our act together, that's what we will become, a third world. And she points out that compared to countries like China, our investments in rail is absolutely pathetic and inadequate. In China right now, that country is investing billions and billions of dollars in high-speed rail, building thousands and thousands of miles of high-speed rail. They're building over 100 new airports. And what are we doing? So, Mr. President, one of my many objections to the proposal struck between the President and the Republican leadership is I think we can do better in job creation than in business tax cuts. There is a time and a place for business tax cuts, and I am not against them. But I would say that at this particular moment in American history, in this particular moment, it makes a lot more sense to create over a period of years millions of jobs, rebuilding our rail system, our subways, our roads, our bridges, and our water systems and many other aspects of our infrastructure.